Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers in search of creative teaching strategies delivered in the amount of time it takes to enjoy a spring walk after school or zip out to Trader Joe's. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm glad to welcome you to episode 31, a look into the creative classroom of my friend Amanda from the blog Engaging and Effective. Amanda is the kind of teacher I would want. She seeks out creative ways to build bonds with her students while she's teaching them. Sometimes they're having so much fun they don't even realize what they're learning. I'll be linking to several great articles on her wonderful website in today's show notes, and I hope you do decide to check them out and then explore her work further. In today's show, I'm going to talk to her about 3 different creative strategies she uses that you can easily adopt. After many visits to her website, I just couldn't narrow it down to only one. I'm so happy to welcome Amanda from Engaging and Effective Teaching to the show. I first discovered her blog last year and fell in love right away with the unique and creative activities she puts together for her students. Thanks so much for coming on, Amanda.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that introduction. I hope I live up to it.
I know you will. Can you tell me a little about what you do and how you got to where you are?
So I'm a high school English teacher, and I started in Baltimore County 6 years ago, and I did a block schedule there, and I did co-teaching and special education, and it kind of led me to where I am now because it was not easy to hold that attention for those block schedules. And that's kind of how I got into this whole idea of I got to get some, clips in there. I have to get, these kids moving around and going. So, and then my husband and I decided to leave the Baltimore area and come back up to where he's from in Pennsylvania. And I ended up in just a small school in, middle of Pennsylvania. And that's where I am.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you started blogging last year and that it helped to kind of revolutionize your teaching.
Yes, absolutely. So I ended up doing, Teachers Pay Teachers. And a couple months into it, I was like, maybe I'll start a blog. That's what everybody's doing. And once I did, and then I started to explore other teachers' blogs, I was just like, oh my God, there's a wealth of information out here. And everybody just brings their best. So, grammar is not my best for what I teach, but I can find somebody else's. And then we just take, little pieces of everyone's best, and that's what you present to your students. And it's changed everything for me.
I love hearing that because I completely agree. I had no idea this world was even out there a few years ago, and now I just revel in it.
Yes,
it's so
sometimes
wonderful.
It's overwhelming, right? Like I need to do
Yeah, totally. You could do 20 different things on any given day just by reading your favorite blogs.
Yes.
Which brings me to my next question. I love reading about so many of the unusual and fun lessons you've developed. I couldn't decide on just one to focus on. Usually when I have a guest on, we go deeply into one thing, but there were 3 that I really wanted to talk to you about. So if you don't mind, let's start with your classroom murder mysteries. Can you tell me a little bit about how you engage your students around murder mysteries?
Yes. So it started out very oddly with The Office, as so many things do start that way. So they did a murder mystery on The Office, and it just kind of clicked in me that my students were getting a little bit squirrely, and I was like, maybe we could do something like this. I went online and found one for free that was meant for parties, and it was about like a Elvis impersonator being shot in Vegas. And I was like, okay, I'll tweak it and I'll make it work. And it did not go like that great, but the students loved it. Like I've never seen them get into character like that. And they're like, what's my motivation? And they ate everything up, and they learned all these new terms, and they experienced it. And then the next year, they saw us doing the lesson again. Some students, we do it in the hallway, so we have some room, and students are, oh man, that was the best lesson. I loved that. And it's like, this is something. Okay, we're on to something.
Yeah.
Now. And of course, I had to change it. It was slightly inappropriate, the Elvis impersonator, some of the aspects of it. So I was like, let's just make it high school students. They relate to high school students.
So how do you set it up? You bring them in, you tell them you're having a murder mystery day. What kinds of materials do you give out to them to get it going?
It's actually pretty quick. So they each get a character card and a set of instructions and a map. And the instructions tell them a little blurb about, what's happened, just to set the scene, if you will. And then the instructions go into detail. Here's the kind of questions you want to ask. Here's what you want to make sure you're doing. You're trying to find out who the murderer is, but you're also trying to be a little suspicious yourself to throw other people on. And
I bet they love that.
Just, give them all these ulterior motives and things like that. And in the character cards are hidden these little secrets. It'll say you have to tell them this, but if you want to, or if it comes up, you can tell them this. And then that gives them some choice too. And then as they read their character cards for about 5 minutes, and then that's it. It's just them up and engaging. And they go and find each other, and then they learn a new clue, and they have to go back and re-interview somebody. So there's 15 cards total. So you can either, for a 30-person class, you pair up, or you can even go down to 12 because 3 of the characters aren't necessary, if you will. They can just kind of be cast aside. And the students, they just work it out, and they keep working at it. And it's a lot of close reading and inferencing, read between the lines, and try to figure out who these people are and what they want and what motivates them. So,
did you find that you had to kind of work into the group and prompt them along? Like, were there certain things you would say every few minutes to keep them on track, or did they just nail it?
Depends on the groups. Some groups, I'm like, you guys are switching cards. Knock it off. Do it right. And then other ones, it's like, well, tone it down. You're not reenacting any of the scenes. One of them's like somebody gets pushed down the steps. It's like, no, nobody go near the steps. We're not going to recreate it. But yeah, it depends on the groups. But sometimes you have to prompt them like, well, maybe you're not asking the right questions, or are you sure that person was there? Did anybody else say they were there? And then it kind of clicks like, oh no, nobody did. Like, let's go, check that out.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Does it take like one block class period, or is it a couple days, or how does it work timing wise for you?
It's kind of nice because it's flexible. So I have a 52-minute period, and a couple of them will figure it out towards the end. And the majority of them won't, and that's okay. Like, they enjoyed it, and they don't necessarily mind that they're not 100% sure as to who it is.
Sure.
But I've also gotten a lot of reviews, people saying, like, I had a block schedule, and it went the entire time, and they even wanted to go longer. And so
that's awesome.
It really does vary by the group. But, it's made to be it is whatever the students bring to it is what they get from it. And they tend to step up and step into that challenge.
It seems like when we present our students with really engaging activities, then they want to do their best, they're excited.
Yeah, exactly. And they do. They get into it because then a little bit's on them too. It's like you can add a little bit to this character's story. You really have to make all the dialogue yourself. And usually they own it, and they like to own it too. Like you said, they step up to it.
That's great. And when the activity is over, what do you collect, or how do you grade it?
We ask them, and I say we because it's usually a co-taught class that I'm doing this in. We ask them to identify who they think who's innocent, 2 people that they know are innocent, and how they know they are innocent. They have to identify at least one red herring, like one obvious plot twist that was in there and was made to look like a killer, but is not. And then who is the killer and how did they know? So they have to find all the clues, like they were supposed to be here, but they really weren't, or they had this secret motive that I uncovered. And then they have to reveal a couple of things that they did themselves. Like, what did you do to add to this? What did you add to your character?
That's really cool. I can really see all the learning that's taking place there and all the things that they are processing as they're going through what just seems like a fun activity to them.
Right. I was just going to say, and they don't even know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's do another. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe in a month or 2. But.
Oh man, that's great. So I want to just quickly note to our listeners that I am going to link to this wonderful full blog post that Amanda put together and her resources on the murder mystery. So if you're frantically taking notes right now, don't worry about it. You'll just be able to link off the show notes. And we're going to move along now because we have so much wonderful stuff to cover. So you're also developing a reputation online as a teacher who really knows TED Talks and who has great ideas for how to use TED in the classroom. How do you use TED to engage your students?
I think I love all TED Talks, but the students do not.
Yeah.
So when I first discovered them, I'm like, this is amazing. Everyone's going to love them all the time. And they don't.
Yeah.
It really is about finding the right ones. And even some that, I've used for years aren't necessarily the right ones for, my classes all the time. So, you know your students and what they're interested in. And there are a few that are always a good one, like the Mind of the Procrastinator. Everyone loves that.
I showed that to my advisees this year, and I convinced the school to show it to the whole school at an assembly, and it was such a smash hit.
Yes, exactly. And he's my secret online boyfriend, and he doesn't even know it. I'm like, I
It's
love
so
you,
funny.
Yes. So anyway, and I found too that it has to be paused a lot. And the students will too. When I write out the questions for the TED Talks, they are quick. Even if it's like a 6-minute talk, I might have 5 or 6 questions. So it's literally, listen a little bit and then reflect on it and write back. Or pause and talk to the students, because usually it's very engaging topics and they have a lot to say. Like sometimes I don't even get to pause it and they're already just, interrupting the movie and talking. So it's like, all right, hold on, let's pause it. Let's discuss it.
That's what we want.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So I actually did one today, which is John Ronson, who's my other favorite TED Talk person. He has a couple TED Talks, which I think is an amazing feat in general. It's like my bucket list is to do at least one. And he did one about psychopath. And that we all have a little bit of psychopath in us. But the way he, delivers it was really interesting. And the students just had a lot to say about it because, he's listing off these identifiers that just as people were like, oh, man, I do that.
Yeah.
Got a little bit of that in me.
That's engaging as a student. You're thinking, what? A little bit of psychopath in me?
Right. And then at one point he's like, it's 1 in 100 people is a psychopath. So it's like, wait a minute, guys, let's break this down. How many people are in this school? And then we're all looking at each other. And
oh my gosh.
Again, what's also nice too is I love the themes of these TED Talks. And the theme of this one is it's not a mental abnormality. It's like we're all a little bit, like that's what makes us human. That's the beauty of us humans, is our little idiosyncrasies and our little tendencies. And then, we leave it and we all feel a little bit, not as uneased as we were before. We feel a little bit better and a little bit more accepting and compassionate towards each other.
Well, that's a lovely way to spend 8 minutes of class time.
Well, this one was leading up to Robert Browning's My Last Duchess and Porphyria's Lover. So then we're going to look at, the narrators of those poems and if they have psychopathic tendencies.
Oh, that's such a creative connection. I guarantee there's no other teacher on the planet that invented that connection for their class. That's so fun.
Not yet. And I don't know if that makes me good or not.
Oh, it definitely makes you good. So I liked in your blog post about this, just that you can use it to fill in those little holes. I think as teachers, we all know about the little holes. I like the creative curriculum pairing, but it's also nice just to have a little playlist up your sleeve for the moment when, chaos reigns at your school and you just need an activity for 10 minutes, or you're subbing for somebody randomly for 10 minutes or whatever. I love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we've all been, in that position where we're just stuck and we're like, I have got nothing. And these kids are going to lose it in about 30 seconds if I don't get some engagement going on here. And, they're so universal too. Even if you're stuck in, a science class or gym class or whatever, it's all, you can use it for whatever.
Yeah. If you were going to suggest to teachers maybe just 2 that they need to go and check out and consider using with their students, what would be your 2 besides the Mind of a Master Procrastinator?
Everyday leadership and don't eat the marshmallow.
Oh, I like that one. It's so funny. We did that test with our 6-year-old. He was able not to eat the marshmallow.
Oh, good for you. Mine did not. My 4-year-old did not make it.
Oh, that's so funny. So I will be sure and embed both those videos in the show notes today. So teachers, you should definitely check these out and think about playing them. They're so good.
Absolutely.
So let's make a smooth transition here from the wonders of TED Talks to the wonders of SNL. I was just grinning from ear to ear when I saw your blog post about incorporating Saturday Night Live into the classroom. I wish I had thought of it first, because more Saturday Night Live in my life is what I need. So
yes, especially now, because it's just so fitting now.
Yes. So can you talk a little bit about how you've incorporated these SNL clips into your class?
Yes, we did. Well, I was in Baltimore, and I was talking to somebody about Saturday Night Live, and we were reminiscing about a specific skit that they did. And then she was like, "Yeah, I used it in my classroom." And I thought to myself, "Oh my goodness, that was really inappropriate. I can't believe you did that." But then, it got me thinking. I was like, "Man, I wish there was." It is great though, and it does engage the students. I wish there was something. And then one day I was just kind of perusing YouTube, which I do sometimes, and I found the Totino's one, and I was like, wait a minute, this is appropriate. And then I went on a hunt, and I was like, I bet I could find at least 2 more. And it took a long time, but I found 2 clean ones that were still relevant, because sometimes Saturday Night Live is just funny, but not necessarily satirical or something that the students would understand or relate to.
Yeah.
So finding 3 that they could actually find funny and would understand and could relate to and was clean.
Oh man, that's the kind of project I start at 11 at night, and then at like 2 in the morning, I'm like, I just need one more.
Exactly. Desperation hit. Definitely. But the students really do like it. And what's interesting is that they don't get it at first. They know it's funny, but it does take them a while to figure out, why it's funny to them, and that there is some kind of deeper meaning to it and what's really being said with it. So it's not just a quick, let's just watch this. It's let's actually think about it. And, they're very subtle too. The commercials are well done. When it's not live, it's very professional. And there's little looks here and there, and there's specific dialogue that is really well written. So we really get to break it down and analyze it. And it's a good time, but the students are still, understanding and taking their learning to a different level.
Do you prompt them with some guiding questions, or do you guys go into like just a full class discussion right after where they ask whatever questions they want, or how does that work for you?
I go with the first one to feel them out. How are they doing with this?
Yeah.
So the first one I leave kind of open, just to almost as like an assessment. Like let's just see where you guys go with it on your own, and then we'll see where we need to go with it. So I have prompting questions in my mind that I can fall back on it. Just like you would a lesson plan. Like if I need to, this is how I can get them where I need them to go. And that's kind of why, too, I included a worksheet on the blog, just as this is where I was coming from, and these are all the specifics that I found to show it. So if you're going to use it, too, you might want to reference, this thing that this one person said and how it relates to whatever it is.
Nice. Which, guys, I will be linking for sure.
Yes.
And then do you feel like your students, like, are they able to stay focused even though it's super funny, even though they're probably so excited that it's SNL? I mean, it's like when you take your students outside, there's this fine line, can they hack it? Do you find that they can hack it?
There is. And I tell you what usually does it is, guys, we have 2 more, but, we won't get to them if, and then usually it
that's a great line.
Quick. And
yeah, good idea.
I've been doing this sort of thing. Like we also did movie trailer remixes and things like that. They kind of come to expect that from me. So there's also, I don't even know how to explain it, but there's almost respect of where I feel like I get them to do the hard stuff for me a little bit easier if they know that there will be some more fun stuff coming up later. And we do relax it a little bit when we are doing the fun stuff. And it's amazing the bond that you build with your students when you're laughing together. It's worth it. It's worth it when we lose a couple minutes to maybe an off-topic comment or a little extra laughter or whatever, because, sometimes they come in and they're like, I wonder what we're going to do today.
Oh, that's so great. I mean, I think what you're talking about is buy-in, I mean, they're with you.
Yeah.
That makes such a big difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I was at a school that was a little bit tricky before, a little bit rough. The area was rough, and it was a long period. So I really had to work for it. like really fights might break out, or, it was, you really had to keep them engaged the entire time. And that's where all that came from.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the most wonderful creative things come out of really hard situations.
Out of desperation.
It's a credit to you, that you found a way to make that work. Do you find that your administrations have been supportive of the kinds of creative things you do in class, or do you feel like you're kind of in that position where you have to shut the door and do what's best for you and your students?
I don't invite people into what we're doing necessarily. The Saturday Night Live stuff, it is clean, but it is also, an adult movie clip it's a show. It's 11:30 at night.
Right.
So clearly, even though it's a clean clip, there's still that stigma attached to it. But for the most part, I guess maybe with the results I get for the students, I don't have too many drop-ins or anything like that. I think if it came down to it, sure, I could maybe get a complaint here or there, but so far it hasn't. Nobody's said anything about what I've been doing in the classroom. And to be honest, as long as I'm keeping it to clips, I've seen, some teachers play, lots of movies. Lots of movies.
Oh, yeah.
And,
no, I think your administration should be flying your flag. But I find that administrations don't always have the same perspective as I do.
Yeah. No, mine seems pretty okay with it. And I'm in a school that's really into the technology aspect. So they like when they see the students, engaged with the technology. Like maybe they're accessing a TED Talk on their iPads and they're able to, do that without class discussion necessarily. They can do it on their own and answer some questions online about it and things like that.
Nice. Well, it's been such a pleasure to hear about these 3 wonderful strategies for engagement. Thank you so much for coming on. When teachers want to connect with you and find more fabulous, engaging, fun lessons like these, where can they find you?
The best way is at my blog. I can't even tell you how super excited, giddy I get when teachers connect with me on the blog. That they're asking questions, and I feel like we're collaborating across the country and sometimes across the world. And I'm very nerdy and think that is the coolest thing ever.
That is the coolest thing ever. Let's not call that nerdy.
Well, nerdy with a positive connotation.
That's right, of course. Nerds unite.
Exactly. And unite on the blog. And, I have a contact form there too. So if people don't want to leave an open comment on the blog, they can submit something through the contact form, and you get back to people pretty quickly, actually. So that's always the best way.
So give us the address. I'll link it in the show notes, of course, but...
It's engagingandeffective.com.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out the show notes to learn more about Amanda and all these great creative classroom options, just head to www.nowsparkcreativity.com and click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. Then you might want to hop on over into my Facebook group, Creative High School English. Amanda is one of the many teachers in there from all over the world, sharing ideas and resources day in and day out in our thriving discussion. I'd love for you to be the next teacher I admit to the group. The Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more podcast recommendations, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.